Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Marketing Inc. podcast. I am super excited to have an awesome guest with me today, Mr. Kevin Oldham. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ali. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Kevin and I were able to connect in Costa Rica at the Commitment Summit. I was able to learn a little bit about what he did, thought that it would be an awesome piece of content for everyone listening, because I personally work with people who would benefit from Kevin's area of expertise. With that being said, Kevin, why don't you give the audience a background on who you are, what you do, and bring us up to the present in your career?
Yeah, so I have a long career. I've been at the intersection of marketing and technology since the beginning of the internet, which is crazy. Like my first job online was an SEO guy for a .com in the late 90s that raised $8 million of venture capital and never figured out how to monetize it. So they crashed the plane. But that was when I first saw what could happen online. And I was like, hey, this is really cool. And so I dove headfirst into online marketing and consider myself one of those kind of OG pioneers because I've been here since the beginning of the internet, figuring out how to help people connect. And about 15 years ago, I got introduced to the franchise business model. And I was like, holy smokes, what a cool business model. It was one of those kind of epiphanies, much like when I learned about the internet and saw how it could help people. I was like, oh, franchise systems are also really cool business models. And so I've always sat on the franchisor side. I've never been a franchisee. I'm a franchisor today. I have a digital marketing company that helps organizations expand via franchising. And it's just one of my favorite business models because it aligns the incentives of everybody that's involved, franchisor, franchisee. You're all on the same team and you're rowing in the same direction. And it's a hell of a lot of fun.
So how did you originally end up as a franchisor, not having been a franchisee yourself? And what was that first franchise business that you started?
I was very blessed. I ended up taking a job back in 2007 that I didn't even really know was with a franchisor. I knew it was a real estate company called United Country Real Estate. And once I got the job as their director of marketing, I realized they were the largest franchisor of rural real estate offices, which should resonate with you because you live in a rural setting. So we had 600 offices. I joined, by the way, a real estate company in fall of 2007. So think about that. I joined a real estate company in fall of 2007, right before we went off a cliff. But what was cool about it was within this brand, we also realized that in rural America, a lot of land was sold via auction. So you wouldn't put a price in it and say, hey, market come. You would have an accelerated marketing event, full tilt, let the market know in a 30 to 45 day window to generate the market and generate a price on that day for that asset. And so the market for auctioneers is highly fragmented. So we started a franchise for auction professionals, which is crazy.
What?
So we had a couple franchise brands. We had the rural real estate brand that had been around for 90 years. We had the auction brand that we started franchising in 2006 that really allowed us to get through the market downturn in real estate by pivoting our business model and helping sell distressed assets at auction through our franchised offices. It was crazy. So it was almost serendipity. I was running a real estate marketing company in 2005 and 2006 with a partner helping sell real estate developments and things like that. And then took this opportunity with this organization. And I ended up being there for 7.5 years, learning the franchise business, getting deeper into real estate, which I've really been in most of my life one way or another, and learning to love the franchise business model. It was just really cool.
Awesome. So you're there, you're learning all about the franchise model. At what point did you say, I'm going to start something like this for myself? And what was that next step for you?
Yeah, so that next step started in 2010 while I was still at the last company. We built another brand called United Real Estate. And by that point in time, I'd worked myself up to the chief marketing officer. And I was the founding chief marketing officer of United Real Estate, which was a brand that we used to augment our other brands. We went into major metropolitan areas because that's where our buyers of real estate came from. So we could feed the two companies. And through that process, we started to go raise some money. And as we were raising the money, we ended up raising about $30 million to recapitalize the business. I was going to be an owner once we recapitalized the business. And it took a couple of years. And by the time we closed the deal, I was like, man, I don't want to ride along for another 7 or 8 years. I want to go out and do my own thing. And so literally the day the transaction closed and the day that I was going to become an owner is the day that I got off the train and started my marketing company in my basement with half a client. I had 2 young babies. I was 40 years old, and I had the support of my wife, who you may have met in Costa Rica. And so that was 8 years ago. And through that process, I said, when we started our marketing company, I said, I want to help franchisors. That's my jam. That's my business model. I love that business model. And so really since day one, we've had franchisors that we've been helping. And then a deal came across the table where we had an opportunity to start out as sweat equity investors in a company called the Smoothie Shop and Supplements. And within about a year and a half, I'd mortgaged my house with my biggest business partner to buy out the founders. And that's a business that we own free and clear and have since 2017, 2018. And believe it or not, yesterday was a big moment in that company. And so we can kind of jam on that as well.
Yeah, for sure. What an awesome story. So you started the marketing side first, and then maybe through the contacts and connections that you were making in that space, you found this other opportunity to become a franchisor. So I think 2 directions that we want to dive into there. Obviously, on the marketing front for franchisors, what do you feel like was missing that they really needed help with? And what is your approach to helping a franchisor get the results they're looking for, whatever those results might be? And we can expand on that as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that they lacked is I looked at the landscape back in 2015. I'm like, there's a lot of people offering marketing support to franchisors, but none of them had really actually done it. They hadn't been a franchisor and sat there and realized the dichotomy that there is between franchisee and franchise. You're not business partners, but you're pretty close. And there's a lot of friction that could come with it, as well as a lot of awesome. And so I think that I felt like there was a gap in terms of having a guide through that process that had real world experience, having sat in the trenches. And surely, and the other thing was, I just knew it was going to be a lot of fun because I love the business model so much for so many reasons. I'm like, this is a hell yes. This is something I could dive into and be curious about and have fun and build authority, right? Who doesn't want to be an expert in their area? And so that's why we decided to get into it. And why we're still at it, 8.5 years later.
Love it. So let's talk a little bit about what you actually do for the franchisors. So obviously there's 2 different areas here. Number 1 would be marketing to get more franchisees. And the other one would be creating the quote unquote corporate marketing strategies and assets that their franchisees would be able to implement. So do you help them with both or just one of those areas primarily?
We help them with both, and that's really our Trojan horse. So we like partnering with emerging franchise concepts. If somebody comes to us and they're very mature, a lot of times they need to have a unique problem for us to solve for it to be a heck yes for us. So we like those formative stages where they're trying to get those initial locations on the map. We help them with the franchise development component. And through that process, just naturally, they see that we approach things differently. We are highly flexible because you have to be, when you're building a franchise, you get feedback, you have to be iterative. And then they realize that we'd be a great partner to introduce to their franchisees and create a shared services type of scenario for them where they can come and get a buffet, get your services off a buffet. So we become a approved partner for the franchisor. So the franchisees can utilize us. And basically we have their endorsement. And sometimes we have the requirement that they utilize us. And so that's the other thing from a business model perspective, is that it's highly leveraged. We can go create a couple of key relationships and then scale through creating kind of a templated type of scenario for their franchisees to operate, where they may utilize us in one degree or another to help them execute that plan. And so we really like that because then we get to be a true partner.
Yeah.
Like we're deep into the business with them. We're not just a vendor.
I really like that. Obviously, the upside for you is tremendous if you are able to really get those key relationships that you believe will be expanding. So, definitely a brilliant strategy on your part. I think that the ability to really, truly help that franchisor have the ability to get more franchisees is going to be super attractive to them as well, because at the end of the day, that's how they're making their money. And they're making their money also if their franchisees do well, typically. And so it does seem like it's a win for everybody. So you primarily have worked with what types of franchises? Is it bricks and mortar, like locally based businesses, or are you working with other types of franchises as well?
It's across the board. We've done weird things. I think auctions is weird to franchise. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay,
I would
let's
put
get a
that.
bunch of auctioneer. Yeah, let's get a bunch of fast talkers in rural America to fly the same flag. To me, that was like, okay, you can franchise anything. And I'm thankful I had that experience early. So, wow, that's weird. And then we've done financial services. We've done other professional services, but the majority of what we do does have a brick and mortar associated with it. Or in some cases, a solution that comes to people. But for the most part, there's brick and mortars, there's locations that are, physical places that people can go to do stuff and buy stuff. Yeah. And that's really, I think I think those are a little bit easier. I know that sounds crazy in today's virtual world, but if I have a location that I can drive people to as a marketer, that makes my life a little bit easier because then I've got a certain
I
radius that I'm
agree.
just,
So that,
pointing people to. Yeah.
yeah. And I obviously serve that very same type of market, less on the franchise side, but locally based businesses is the core of my audience at the end of the day. And I think that it's so important for people to be able to serve them. I have worked with a decent number of franchisees, and what I have seen is a big disconnect between the franchisor and the franchisee in terms of the marketing, what they are offering to the franchisee a lot of times on the digital asset side makes it more challenging for the franchisee. If they can't even have a website where they can
No.
install a pixel on it to be able to capture their own local market traffic or have that effective digital strategy, it obviously is not going to serve either party because, like you mentioned, there could be tension or friction between that franchisee because the franchisor isn't really helping them. Most of the time, it's because they don't understand what needs to be done. They don't even know some of these things are even considerations or issues at all. But I do
Right.
think that being able to, with those individual locations with what they need is obviously going to serve everybody. So, what have you found have been the biggest things that you are able to help with those franchisors that support their franchisees? Maybe it's things that were missing altogether, or maybe it's things that they were not really doing correctly in terms of actually helping their locations get results. What have you seen as the biggest impact you're usually able to make on the franchisor side?
Well, you just hit the nail on the head and kind of one of our key differentiators, which is the fact that there is this disconnect a lot of times between franchisee and franchise. A lot of times and that's something I got to recognize at my last company because we had a physical office building with like 60 employees in it. And I would hear us referred to as the ivory tower sometimes. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's a disconnect. They think there's a they versus them versus us. And I'm like, that's not good because we're all on the same team. So one of
Yeah.
the core things that I think we are amazing at doing, and I mentioned this earlier, is the flexibility component. When you are a franchisor, you are developing a roadmap and a template that people can and should be able to follow. And furthermore, they should be excited about it because they just made a huge investment in trust in a business opportunity, probably way bigger than their house in terms of emotional investment, time investment, and all these things, right? And so I think one of the biggest mistakes is creating an organization where there is this feeling of them versus us. And one of the biggest things that we've been able to do is come in and understand what they need as far as like franchisees and what the franchisors need, and then creating a middle ground that works for both of them. So the franchisees felt they're heard, they have the flexibility and they have the autonomy to do the things that they need to do to grow their business, because it's their business, just happens to be under the franchisor's flag. And I think for us, it's the empathy component, knowing that there is this friction between Zor and Z, and there always will be. There always is. How do you minimize that? And how do you make it so that it's a win for everybody? And that's why I like to get in at the beginning of the franchise system, because we can go and build those things from an infrastructure perspective that make it so you don't have issues down the road. And that's probably one of my secret sauces, is I'm able to unlock and see things. I'm a futurist. I'm able to see cause and effect down the road when other people are not. Be like, if we do it this way, if we create one website that every franchisee operates off of, here's the negative things associated with that, and here's the positives. And Mr. Zor, we can walk you through that process, and you can make a decision, because it's ultimately your company, but here's how it's going to impact your franchisees. And we deliver way more than just like marketing. Like, we give a lot of consultative stuff away as part of our value. And I think that's what makes us a great partner for these franchise systems that we get to partner with, because we're flexible, but we also provide great counsel, and we earn our seat at the table. And that's pretty cool as well.
Absolutely. So I do love that. I think it sounds like a smart decision for you, because a lot of times it is far easier to just build things the right way from the beginning than it is to take something that's been operating what we'll call incorrectly and try and tear it down and then build it back up. There's so much more that goes into that. So definitely a smart move on your part, I think, just from a stress and effort level, but really great suggestions for them. So in terms of what do you think are some, maybe it's a little bit different for every franchise, but what are some things that you feel like is always really important for them to consider when setting up their initial marketing strategies and plans?
First of all, it depends on the business type. The playbook for restaurants doesn't deviate much. Like, you want to look at, if you're like a food concept, for example, which is huge in franchising, it might be one of the biggest franchise categories, I'm guessing, is food service. That's what my franchise is in as well. You want to establish something that I think gives you, as the franchisor, the control that you need over your brand without making your franchisees feel like you're a dictator. And I think that's what a lot of people think is, if you join a franchise system that's very, hey, we're going to dictate what you do, I can tell you that your franchisees will unionize. Because I'm a nice guy who's very public about my franchise experience, I get people reaching out to me all the time. And I had a group of 5 of the top 10 franchisees of an unnamed system reach out to me, unionizing, trying to form a side business. And I'm like, I literally watched this thing and I'm like, holy smokes. If their franchisor knew what was happening, they would blow a gasket. And the reason why, they were at this place where they just couldn't work together. They just could not work together. Z and Zor were battling, and really it just felt like the Z was just trying to, the franchisor was just trying to just cram it down their throats. And they're people. These are people who own a business, and the business is their lifeblood. It's providing for their families. And they're like, I have to go do what's best for me and my family. And so you never want to find yourself in that position. As a franchise, or you are there to serve others. That is what you do. You're there to support entrepreneurs. That's your main business model. Your secondary business model may be making these sandwiches and doing all those things, but your primary business model is to support your franchisees so they can go make the hamburgers and serve them, right? And if you forget that's your main customer, as soon as you forget that's your main customer, you're in trouble. And I see that time and time again. And so my gut tells me, hey, if you build something from the ground up and you build it or you're trying to reposition your business in terms of how you manage it, but you build it so that you are a servant of the franchisees. That's what your team comes in and does every single day. That's your core customer. I think you'll do well. But if you come in and you're like, oh, they're this necessary means to an end, and they're this vessel that we use to reach our customers, wrong way to think about it. Very short-sighted, and it will backfire. The question is just how bad?
Yeah, definitely. So what do you feel like franchisees want the most from their franchisor? Obviously, it's that support and they want to feel valued and heard. But what are some of the things that you have seen in the past? Because a lot of times, if you are coming in, you're doing things right from the beginning. But these people that reach out to you, what do they feel like are the biggest things that they need that they're simply not getting to be able to thrive as that franchisee?
A lot of times franchisees will come to us because they feel like they're not getting the marketing support that they need from a franchisor. I had a conversation with one yesterday. It happens all the time. And my question for them typically is, what specifically is it that you feel like you're not getting? And when we peel behind the curtain, we'll typically see that they have just some sort of vanilla solution, shared services from approved vendors. And it just is, it's check the boxy is like how I like to look at it. Oh, we got the corporate apparel, we got this, and maybe they'll run like a Google ad campaign. And it's just going to be this very vanilla stamp, check next, stamp, check next. And I feel like that's highly incorrect because they reach out to people like me, to people like you, because they need innovative solutions to get people to maybe their coding school or their smoothie shop or whatever it is. And so I think what a lot of franchisors are lacking is the in the trenches type of deep knowledge around things like you and I are both high level fanatics. We love the platform. I think a lot of franchisors probably don't know about the platform. What could that do if they were to install that type of technology into their business? What could it do for their franchisees in terms of being able to do cool things to drive traffic to their local location? So I think that probably the headline is that the franchisees probably feel like their franchisors are very too corporate and disconnected from their needs. And so they start looking for somebody else to fill those needs. Out of necessity, they start looking for who's a marketer that I could hire, who's somebody that I could trust as a guide, or somebody that I can get some information from that will help me solve this problem of not having sales where I want them to be. And my goal as a franchisor is to make it so that they have those conversations with us. And I think my goal as a franchisor also is to be, and if you were to ask my franchisees, they know that we're solution oriented, very open. We know that, I'll tell you, some of the best ideas in franchising come from the franchisees. I'm going to tell you a story about how my last company, how we did not crash the plane during the market downturn because of one suggestion from a friend. We started an auction franchise at our last company because of a gentleman in Jay, Oklahoma named Leroy Hendren told our CEO, hey, you should look at auctions. A lot of this stuff trades hands via auction in rural America, and it is a fragmented market. And if we didn't have that auction division to carry us through the market downturn, I'm not sure if that 90-year-old business, if we would have crossed the chasm. But because we had that business model in place, which was a suggestion from a franchisee, we were able to pivot and navigate a recession. And so I think that was also like this deep imprint for me early in my franchise career. Listen to your franchisees. They're smart people. They're entrepreneurs. They've invested money in your brand, and ride together. Not every suggestion they have is going to be awesome, but they do need to be listened to. They need to understand that they've been heard and that you may or may not do what they suggest, but that they do have a voice at the table.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of, let's talk a little bit about the specifics of what you have seen work most effectively for the franchisee marketing. So you obviously have the franchise yourself. You're working with these other franchises. There's not going to be a one size fits all necessarily, but talk about what you feel like has been the most successful approaches that you've used that has been something that maybe works across the board with a lot of the different franchise locations, something that could be used in California or Oklahoma for whatever type of business that may be, whether it's physical or digital marketing?
Yeah. What's actually going to be both. And that's what I'm glad that you asked that question. I'm a old school kind of branding guy. As running this company, I've gotten more into the tactical type of stuff, but I got to launch Virgin Mobile in the United States. I've worked with BMW, American Express, like global brands previously in my marketing career. And so I bring that lens of brand marketing and old school. Hey, you've got to reach these people with, in my opinion, probably 20 impressions now before they start to care about what it is that you're offering. And so I love this playbook, and it's very simple and it's very economical. I love layering on social ads, like for restaurant concepts, for example. I love layering on like social ads along with old school EDM, every door direct mail postcards that are going in at the same time that they're getting lit up on social. At the same time, they're getting like 4 postcards over 4 weeks in their mailbox. We're also hitting them online with maybe a special offer. I love that playbook. It is simple. It is scalable. It works anywhere in the United States. And it used to be that every door direct mail was a pain in the butt to figure out, but now it's pretty cheap. You can go online and find somebody who can service that does it for you. So it's pretty simple to get done. And so I love doing that stuff. That's one of my favorite playbooks. We'll use that a lot of times when we're launching a new location, because if it's a hyper local business, I might just be pulling from a 3-mile radius. I don't have to go nuts. There's just a certain addressable audience that's going to come to that eyelash studio or whatever. And so that's one of my favorite playbooks out there right now. It's simple. It's not new. It's just, hey, just get super tactical and surgical with your map and get super with your geography.
So what do you do primarily? And again, going to depend on the franchisee, franchise business as a whole. But what are some of the offers that you like to run, whether it's for new locations or existing locations? And how are you tying that into the advertising? So my thought here is particularly on the franchise restaurant stuff, what type of trackability are you trying to install in those campaigns? And maybe it's not, maybe it is in part the branding and the impressions, but let's talk a little bit about the offers that you've seen work well, and then some of the tracking mechanisms that you feel like are the things that those franchisees should be paying the most attention to.
Yeah. And I'll speak in broad categories on offers. So if you're in food service or something like that, where a discount, a lot of times it makes a lot of sense. We're helping a co-working franchise right now. They don't have food, and it doesn't make sense to do discounts in terms of the way their business model is. So we're giving them a free gold membership for a week to try out all the things that, services that are within this co-working franchise. So the offers depend on the type of business and what we have available that is something of perceived value or something that doesn't cut into margins too much. In food service, you have these hard costs associated with food. So you got to be careful with your margins. But what I like is, what I found is most effective, Allie, is when you put together the offer, is to make it so that it is super, super simple for that franchisee to take that offer to their markets and then to track that offer and the ROI on it. So 100% of what we do is trackable first and foremost. If I use a postcard, chances are there's a QR code on it, there's a lead tracking phone number associated with it, and there is probably a dedicated URL associated with that direct mail effort. Because I'm a nerd and I like to quantify everything. And I like to be able to then go to other franchisees and be like, yeah, this works. But it also makes the franchisee feel good about their marketing efforts and gives them confidence, so that if they want to have a customer appreciation day once a year, they know that direct mail actually works, right? They've proven it to themselves that it works. So we try to track everything. If I've got a client, we're running a billboard or something traditional out of home media, I will use as much tracking technology as possible. All of that's coming back into high level, or I got some clients that are using HubSpot, but all of that's coming back in so that then we can look at what actually works. But the offer stuff's pretty basic. It's, hey, if you got food, you're going to give discounts on it or something, right? A free fill in the blank. If you've got a service, you're probably going to be giving away some time or something along those lines. If you have a physical product, it's a little bit different, but yeah, offers are not the complex part. It's more about making sure that you communicate them correctly. And then furthermore, that you're tracking everything from end to end.
Absolutely. So definitely the EDDM stuff, I think, is something too many businesses sleep on these days. And I find that it
Hmm.
is easier to get attention now in the mailbox than it used to be because so many people have shifted to digital only. So love that you're incorporating that.
Yeah.
Do you find that through your direct mail efforts that you usually see more, whether it's opt-ins or offer claims or whatever it is that you were focused on through QR code, URL, or call tracking, or is it just a mixture of all of them?
It's a mixture, and what I've come to believe is it varies on geography. That's like my only thing I can come up with. It's not, hey, more people scan the code, the more people type in the URL, the more people call. Very few people call, actually. Nobody calls a restaurant. It's not really a thing. We just
Yeah.
put the phone number up for maybe the
Yeah.
outlier. Some people that are a little bit older may want to pick up the phone, but most digital natives are like, yeah, I just want to scan or
Yeah.
go click. So that's where the majority of it comes from. We don't get a ton of calls from these campaigns. We put it on there just so people know we're a legitimate business and they can call us. But yeah, that's most of
Yeah,
it's digital
for sure.
inquiries. And that's what we like. It's cool because then we can go see it in the dashboard. And I think the biggest thing, Allie, is what one of the things I try to strive for through my profession is to empower, because there's a lot of responsibility being a franchisor. And I'm considered a franchisor even when I'm a consultant for a franchisor. I'm on their team. Most of the time I have an email address associated with them. Like
Yeah.
they pay us big money to basically be a white label, seat at the table, having a conversation with these folks.
Yeah.
And so what I try to do is I literally throw on my chief marketing officer hat again, and I mentor these people. I will show that I try to empower them. I try to educate them as much as I can without blowing their mind away and overwhelming them, because us marketers we can get pretty techie sometimes. And so I try to show them and guide them. Part of what I want to do in my profession, full tilt, is everybody that I work with just have a little bit more knowledge about subjects as we work together. And that helps me feel like I'm of value and of service to others at the end of the day, because I like empowering people and I love it when people learn, because I'm a learner myself. When they can unlock these new skills and see, hey, direct mail, here's what EDDM is, and here's how we use it for our business. And then they know it's in their playbook, or Facebook ads, and they understand they can work. It's just you don't push that boost button on your phone when you're in the restroom real quick. Like you actually got to put together a legitimate campaign. Those things make me, you got to think about it. Like those things make me excited when I see franchisees get it and then adopt it. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And that's going to be a good relationship for the franchisor as well. An engaged franchisee who's all in makes for a very healthy relationship, and also typically a very profitable relationship for both parties.
Love it. So let's talk a little bit about what you like to do on the digital side. Are there specific platforms that you focus on more heavily than others? What types of campaigns are you running? We talked a little bit about the offers. So are those mainly conversion focused campaigns, or instant forms, or messenger, or again, a mix of everything? What do you feel like are your go-to digital strategies for that hyper-local franchisee?
For our hyper-local franchisees, typically our tech stack's pretty simple. For intent-based stuff, we're using Google Ads. We want to be there when people are searching for a solution. When we have specific offers or we've got a new grand opening or something, we'll use social ads. We'll interrupt people who are not solution aware and let them know, hey, we're here in your market to help you. And then one of the things that my team is always looking at, 'cause I don't run any of these ads myself, my team will look at what's the market look like? Because one of the things we found is that campaigns can vary, and the media buying mix can vary between markets, which was also highly unexpected. So I'm in Kansas City. There was a completely different playbook in Kansas City than there is New York City. Completely different.
Yeah.
And my team, again, is this very flexible, almost too flexible sometimes, in my opinion, but willing to go out there and experiment. For example, we've got this co-working space that we're getting ready to open locations throughout the United States. We're starting in Texas, but we know that the that the mix is going to be different. The ad formats are probably going to be a little bit different in California than they are in Texas. We may find that Texans are very receptive to messenger ads, for example, but then we go to California and we find that those same ads don't work as well. So what do we have to do, or what do we get to do? We get to iterate, we get to test really quickly, and then find out what works in that location. And to me, that's one of the things that's cool about what we do at our company, DeFactory, but also it's one of the things that will keep us small. And I'm actually okay with that, because we realize that it's not one size fits all. Even within a franchise system, even within two people flying the same flag, they can be in different locations and have different needs to get what they need to come out of their local location. And to me, that's also, I think, one of the cooler things, because we educate the franchisors about that and we say, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to be a partner to your franchisees. We're going to put together a shared services program that we think is going to work. But no, Mr. Franchisor, that we may have to change that playbook for some people, because that playbook may not work in Wisconsin the way it works in Florida. And so you have to give us the autonomy to move things around for your franchisees. You also have to have some autonomy for them as well, because you got to do what works. Because if you do what works, then the royalty revenue goes up and the royalties go up and everybody's happy. And ultimately, that's what our job is. Boost revenue at the local locations. So that helps our franchisors get their royalties, which then is what funds us being on the team, and the whole thing works.
I love it. So much great information to share. Kevin, it's been awesome to have you on the show. If you could leave the audience, whether they are just a local business owner or maybe an agency for the local business owners, potentially some franchisors and franchisees listening as well, if there is, just a piece of advice that you feel like is important for them to know, could be about anything, strategy, tactics, business overall, what would you share with them?
My biggest thing is, and this is just a filter, which I think I've used on this show, and I got this from Derek Sivers, who's an author. He's an OG internet marketer. I think I am, but he had a company called CD Baby, where he was like figuring out how to sell independent label CDs online back in the early 2000s. This dude's like old school, right? And he has a book called Everything You Want. And there's one line that he uses to filter everything. It's either a hell yes or it's a no. And that filter, when you use it, makes life simple. It helps you say no to stuff that's not a hell yes. And every no creates opportunity for things that are a hell yes. And that's one of the filters I've been sharing with my children as well. And either it's a heck yes or it's a no. And so that's my parting advice.
Yes. I really love that. I'm actually going through a similar phase of that right now, looking at everything that I'm doing and asking myself, is this something I'm overly excited to be doing? And if not, like you said, you got to let it go, because there are only so many hours in the day for all of us. We have to decide where we put our time and energy, and you could be putting it into things that are not going to serve you moving forward. That's another reason I really love your model, because for you, you are able to leverage your time with a couple of those key relationships, like you mentioned, but that ultimately exposes you to a far greater market, far greater audience, and the ability to make a bigger impact. So I think that's amazing. If people want to learn more about you, your services, your franchise, where can they go to find you?
KevinOldham.live, OLDHAM. This could be the best place to learn about my podcast, my businesses. You also hear my personal story on how I almost crashed my plane, my marketing company's plane, back in 2017. So yeah, it's the best place to go.
I love it. If you guys are interested in learning more, definitely check it out. You have so much to share. Thank you for coming on the show today, and hope to see you back in the near future. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Hope you enjoyed it today, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.